Everybody, welcome back to the Beyond the Peloton podcast. I'm Spencer Martin, author of the Beyond the Peloton newsletter. I'm here with Andrew Vontz of the Choose the Hard Way podcast and newsletter. We are talking, well, Andrew wants to go deep into Milan-Sanremo, and we will. We've got our stats. Andrew's watched the last 50 years of the race, start to finish, so he's ready to go. But I'm going to make you talk about Matteo Jorgenson, Paris-Nice. What's going on here?
I've got a few things up my sleeve related to Matteo and Juan Ayuso. So we're on the same wavelength
with this guy. But do you want to plug your brand new Substack before we get into it?
Yeah. If you love this show and you enjoy these takes, the number one thing you can do to support me personally is to please follow my Substack. That's where I write about bikes, Zen, and life. Sometimes serious, often a lot of what you're getting here. You can find that at alwaysthehardway.substack.com. I think Spencer may put this in the show notes, and I am also one of Spencer's Substack recommendations. If you follow his Substack, I might be somewhere there on the page. This week, I have an exclusive story. I actually wrote a story Spencer, like a journalist, like I spent time writing something that has a narrative. And that story also has an exclusive interview. It's with Chase Wark, who I am calling the people's champion. He is the junkyard dog of gravel racing. And last weekend, he set an FKT, which I'm just saying that like, oh yeah, FK, what am I, a run club person? the fastest known time for the Mega Mid-South, which is a 300-mile loop. Whatever you think of FKTs, Chase did that on his own in 16 hours and 58 minutes, which is pretty impressive in my opinion. And this kid's driving around in a van. This is not like a Death Star lifted Sprinter van Mercedes that you're seeing at Whole Foods that's driving out to the Flatirons for a hike. He's in a van, Spencer. Like there's a mattress in the back, some muddy bikes, a case of rice. This is hardcore. So please go check it out. Alwaysthehardway.substack.com. I really appreciate your support. Please subscribe. If you really love this stuff and you want a lot of it, please become a paid subscriber. I know there's a lot of subscription fatigue out there. I recommend you cancel some other worthless subscription and pay me. Thank you.
You had an interview with Chase and you say like you went to BWR Arizona, didn't suit him. I looked it up, man, finished 10th. Pretty good finish.
I mean, this is like, seriously, there are people out there racing gravel now. We've seen it. Like people like Chad Haga, Lachlan Morton, they're not 7 watts per kilogram riders. They're probably like 6 point something, especially Lachlan on a climb.
Really good. Yeah.
I mean, what's Lachlan's full flag time? We're looking at it. Not prepared. Come on, Jamie, look it up. Yeah, seriously though, like these are world tour riders who are coming out and playing around on Greg Van Avermaet, the golden helmet. Chase is probably like 5 watts per kilo, but the guy's CDA, go look up some footage of this kid. He's like Remco level CDA. It's pretty wild. So that's kind of his edge when he's out there. But yeah, he said BWR didn't suit him because it had a lot of climbing and a lot of single track, and that's not his background. He's more of a rolling gravel specialist like myself, or puncheur. I don't know which thing it would be. But Spencer, there's so much to talk about this week. We can loop back on that Lachlan Morton full flag time. We've got the Golden Nugget Criterium and Safety and Race Clinic taking place on March 9th. In addition to that, yes, I have watched every edition of Milan-Sanremo for which there is footage. I mean, I went back to pre-3K footage days. Yeah,
I feel like after 5 years ago, you're like, what is happening here? Why is it so pixelated?
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I dusted off some World Cycling Productions DVDs, got the DVD player out of the basement for anybody who's old enough. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Like getting those DVDs out, getting on your Blackburn wind trainer, staring at a sheet of drywall for 10 hours like John Stamstead. That's how we used to do it, kids. And that's why we're so tough.
I do think World Cycling Production, I have so many of those DVDs and I don't even know how I would watch them if I tried, but we've lost something because you could just buy, they would sell like a 30-hour, maybe not 30, like a 15-hour version of the Tour de France, and you could watch it, and it was actually a nice condensed version of every race. And it's like, can't really do that anymore, you know?
No, you can't. Even
It
if you
should
go online and
digitize
you,
the company.
yeah, you try to get I don't even know which act. It's not Eurosport anymore. It's the WWE. I don't know what it is.
TNT Sports, baby.
Yeah,
That's not confusing at all.
Yeah, TNT Sports, Valan, who has all the end race footage, which I love watching, but for some reason they only make 20-second clips. I'd love to see 10, 15 minutes of that stuff.
Isn't that weird?
Just whatever the case may be. Yeah, whether it's Valan or TNT, by the time you watch the introduction thing with their logo and like all the fluff with the stage thing, which you're just trying to fast forward through as fast as possible on the trainer, like that eats up probably 3 minutes of the stage. And then you're getting like 4 minutes and not the stuff you want to see. You don't get to see the breakaway form, and then the highlights are over. Yeah. It's kind of a drag.
I will say shout out Flow Bikes. For the races they have rights to, they seem to do full races on YouTube, and then they have great condensed, like 20-minute versions of the races. That's not the whole calendar, which is frustrating. But Andrew, before we got to
let's get into this.
So before we get into Sanremo, last weekend was Paris-Nice. Matteo Jorgenson won his second consecutive Paris-Nice, which is nuts. Like, kind of won it. I looked at his margin of victory was 1 minute 15 seconds. You think, well, that's not that much. This is the largest margin of victory at Paris-Nice since 1995. So the guy crushed it. Was like really never under pressure, even though his team looked like it just like took the train from the start to the finish of the stage and just left him by himself to fend for himself on the one of the hardest days of racing on pro cycling of the year, or trickiest, most complex. And then Juan Ayuso wins one of the strangest Terreno Adriaticos I've ever seen. I think it was a little home cooking on the course where there was one single climb and then many days of like cold, hilly racing and a flat time trial. You're like, who are they trying to allow to win this race? Perhaps they want Filippo Ganna to win and become the first Italian since Vincenzo Nibali to win the overall. But Ayuso wins kind of easily, actually. Johan Bernil disagreed with me. Did not think it was effortless, but I think he would have won that any way they cut it. Let's start with Matteo. I mean, I don't like talking about American cycling for the sake of American cycling. So I know in Magnus Sheffield won the final stage of Paris-Nice. So you have like an American stage winner, American overall winner. Yay, American cycling. We're back, baby. Next, Lance Armstrong. That's never gone wrong before. Those people always pan out. But in this case, Matteo, like this is really impressive. And if you look at his results from when he joined Visma, he's like almost never been bad. Like he comes into the team. He's one of their, like, I guess comes in as a classic domestique, but, Wout crashes at Dwars. He wins the race, and now he's like one of their classics leaders. And then also while he's leading their classics, he's one of their key Tour de France domestiques. But then while he's doing that, he's probably their best stage racer at this point, and he's winning major stage races. So, like, you rarely see riders win back-to-back Paris-Nices. It's like Miguel Indurain did it. Sean Kelly won 6 in a row, by the way. Holy smokes, that man was good.
Wow.
Max Schachmann, oddly, won back-to-back ones, 2020, 2021. If you remember, there was like a COVID-shortened one in 2020. Roglic was winning in 2021 and crashed, of course. And then Schachmann rode away and won the overall. But usually it's like big stars win back-to-back. Vino won back-to-back Paris-Nices. Like, what are we looking at here? Like, I was on, and I talked to my good friend, Bradley Wiggins, after the race. And he said, Matteo Jorgensen going to win the Tour de France. Like, are we getting to that territory? Is it time to bust that out?
Good friends. Has he spotted you when you've been benching yet?
You never go to the gym with Wiggins. You're going to look bad.
Yeah. Okay.
We don't have that build. Can't be with him.
That's a fair. I mean, the first thing I want to address here is you mentioned Sean Kelly, 6 Paris-Nices. Was that in a row?
In a row. He might have won more, not contiguously, which is nuts. Sean Kelly, by the way, I met the man in person recently, like most low-key guy. He was like in a booth, like selling his cycling tours, just like out there working. You would have no idea like that he was like Pogacar before Pogacar. The guy who's winning Grand Tours. He's winning at whatever classic he wants, like every major classic. Every major 1 week stage race, like really an impressive rider, impressive person. I'm stalling because I'm trying to find how many Paris-Nices he won. So he wins 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88. Wow. So that's 7 in a row. Holy smokes.
That's a pretty good record. And as you say, Spencer, he's just an unassuming guy. He's out there in his manure boots. He's got a sheepdog. He's like shooting geese and cooking a stew, basically. And when you think about the fashion in which he won those editions of Paris-Nice, maybe one of the most striking things is his chapeau. He tall capped. He always had the tall cycling cap.
Yeah.
It must have been starched. How did that guy keep the thing on his head? I mean, even when they went in the direction of hairnets, he still was like popping the cap, which as a kid, I was like, man, this is the most badass thing. The only other rider that I think had a look that I thought was that cool growing up. Do you remember Edwig van Hooijdonk, who rode for Buckler?
I do.
His son, Nathan, was in the sport for a while, right? Yeah, Edwig
famously was in the sport and was like key part of Visma, and then it is no longer because he had to retire because of a heart condition.
Yeah, that's correct. Anyway, Edwig van Hooijdonk, going back to our Uno X boy who won with leg warmers the other week, Edwig van Hooijdonk caused scandal because he was the first pro rider to run knickers in the classics. He covered his knees. It was outrageous.
It
was absolutely outrageous. Yeah, Buckler beer, riding a Colnago. Man, that guy was such a stud. All right, so getting back to Matteo, I know Bradley Wiggins' comment was Matteo's a tour winner. Then sure enough, Matteo makes a comment in an interview, I plan to win the Tour de France, I think.
And Matteo, he disarms you because he's kind of quiet, but the man, like, he calls a shot. Like, he's like, has a lot of confidence. I mean, and that's one of the things Wiggins said, like, really, you meet him and you're like, this is a confident person. Like, does not have the neuroticism that a lot of pro cyclists have.
Yeah, no, completely. He radiates confidence. And if we think back a few seasons to the Movistar year when he was out of pocket, which it turns out is not all that uncommon, paying for his own altitude camps. I don't know if he had Alan Lim motor pacing him, but he was pulling out all the stops out of his own funds to try to go to the next level. I don't know if he built a sauna or if he bought the $100 one off Amazon that's like a body bag, but this, like, no stone was unturned. Matteo was all in. People were like, what is this guy doing? Shouldn't Movistar be paying for this? No, like they're out having a pasta dinner while Matteo's like in the sauna,
inflamed.
Yeah, Matteo's in the sauna like an extra 20 minutes. I actually think that this, for everybody out there, I know that there are still people in America who are trying to make it as professional road cyclists. Maybe you're trying to be a pro gravel racer. Maybe you're like me. You're entering the autumn of your life and you are still determined to go to the world tour. I think Matteo is a great example of investing in yourself and how that can pay off in the long run. So if you're out there and, I don't know, maybe you're on the local Cat 3 team and you're just enraged that you're not getting that second or third pit bike that you asked for free from Trek. Matteo paid for it. We all know that racer, right, Spencer?
Yes. Yeah. I do know that racer. Just enraged.
Yeah. Anyhow, spend a little bit of money, put in some time, do the work, and look where you can go. You might go to the Tour de France. This was on my mind, as I'm sure it was on your mind. So we have Spencer. I listened to you and Johan talking about this tension potentially between Mr. 150, Jonas Vingegaard, and Matteo within that race, like strange hypothermia subplot. Who's in control? Should Jonas have, laid back, maybe pace Matteo there on stage 3 instead of riding away and then getting smoked in the sprint? Lots of question marks. So now we have Jonas. It's been announced he just canceled his next race. So
that's not a good sign.
Yeah, so no. He appears to be pretty seriously injured, I would say. I'm guessing we've got what was it? What year did Pog break his wrist? Was that 2022?
That was 2022, yes.
Yeah, okay.
No, wait, no.
2023.
2023, yeah. the second of his tour losses.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got we have Jonas perhaps in a Pog broken wrist situation.
Yeah,
that's what I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's March. I think Pog broke his wrist a little bit later. I don't remember which race he did it in. I think it was possibly in April.
It was, the April, it was like beginning of Liège. We never saw it on TV. It was that early in the race.
Yeah. Okay. So Jonas is a bit further out. This is putting his tour in serious doubt. I mean, yeah, he can be on Zwift, but the problem is when you're coming back from a broken wrist, as we saw with Pog, it's when you're standing and you have to really pull the horns, as my good friend Paul Niemeyer, former German professional cyclist, professional triathlete, told me his coach would always yell at him on the radio, Paul, pull the horns. You're dying, pull the horns, Paul. It's one of my favorite sayings. So when Jonas gets up to pull the horns, he's not going to be able to pull those horns quite as hard as he needs to. It impacts your core stability, your ability to produce power, everything. So then we start to have this dynamic within Visma where I don't know, is Matteo ready for this? Can he take on the true Galacticos? Is he ready to pull on his Galactico galoshes and get out there and go head to head with Pog? And at the same time, I'm sure we were going to get to this, Spencer, but if we think about some of Juan Ayuso's, who I think genius level rider talent, he's done some things that have seemed a bit iffy, but it might all come into focus. Is he going to be content to stay in his support role now that he's gotten a little bit of a taste of that trident? He bears the trident now.
A lot there. Yeah. Just to go back to the Jonas thing, the problems, obviously, maybe he didn't break his wrist, I guess, is what we're supposed to say. The wrist is very hurt, and his next race on the schedule is
the sensations are not good in the wrist.
Yeah, so he might, according to his schedule, he's not racing until 3 weeks before the Tour de France. But the problems, in my mind, started well before he got hurt because he was getting dropped on uphill finishes by Joao Almeida, who's not nearly as good as today, Pogacar. So concerns there, like why is he not as good as he looked at the beginning of the season in the past seasons? I had concerns. This compounds my concerns. On Matteo Jorgenson, no, he cannot beat Tadej Pogacar straight up. That's not happening, at least this year. He would need some sort of wrinkle to happen. But let me take you back, a little history lesson. The year is 2021. Who's leading Visma? Not called Visma at the time. I believe they're Jumbo Visma. It's one Primož Roglič. Primož Roglič goes to the Tour as the team leader. The man's coming off a devastating second place finish. He crashes out. A guy, an unknown rider, Jonas Vingegaard, gets second at the Tour. You're like, wow, nice result. 2022, Primož Roglič is leading that team at the Tour de France. Crashes out again, I believe. And you know who wins that race? Jonas Vingegaard, because they had two leaders and they put Pog in the mixer on, that was like stage 14 or whatever,
right.
Or maybe that was stage 11. And he just didn't know who to chase. He's chasing everybody. He doesn't eat. He cracks. So it is oddly similar to that, where you would never have guessed Jonas Vingegaard is next Tour de France winner. But then he just kind of comes out of nowhere. He's still not leading the team. They have this two-pronged attack. He benefits from that, wins the race. It's kind of reminds me a lot of this, where now you have Jorgenson coming up. You're like, well, he's not as good as Vingegaard, but are we going to be saying that in 6 months, a year? I mean, what's weird is I think, yeah, he's not as good, but he's actually been quite a bit better all year this year. If you're just saying who's their best stage race right now, it's Matteo Jorgenson. Obviously, we're not at the Tour, so a little early to be throwing dirt on Jonas's grave, but Matteo is really good. I think he gets underestimated, I think, because he's so tall. You have just a hard time mentally imagining that rider winning the Tour. Same thing with Bradley Wiggins. It's this guy can't win the Tour. And then guess what? He won the Tour because he got really long femurs and he can spin and put out 470 watts for as long as it needs to. But same thing with Matteo, and he's American. So I almost have a bias against American riders. If Matteo was called Matteo Vapentini and he was an Italian 25-year-old, I'd be this guy's going to win 5 Tour de France's. He's unbelievable. But I underestimate people when they're American. So probably because of my own self-loathing, but I don't think he can win straight up. But I don't imagine this. I'll rephrase the question. Could you imagine Matteo Jorgenson winning the Tour de France this year if Jonas is not there and Tade's not there? So he's basically beating Remco, who is not racing. Training.
Are we going to see Remco there? I think that's another question mark. And then if in the absence of Pog, what happens in the vacuum of power on UAE? Who are you riding for?
Joao Almeida.
Is Juan Ayuso riding for?
No, he's not going. He's not going to the Tour because he's gonna.
Well, what if Pog? Inshallah, nothing happens to Pog prior to the Tour. Let's say Pog's out and you need to sub in another rider. Who are you putting on the roster? You're putting Juan Ayuso on that roster.
You think they're going to have him do the Giro Tour double at 22?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You got to tenderize the meat.
Juan Ayuso couldn't freaking hold Matteo Jorgenson's jock strap. Like that guy, just mentally, he would be out of the race after the first week.
I think that's what you think. We haven't. I would love to see. I would love to see a fresh Juan Ayuso in a leadership position at a Grand Tour.
We have. He got fourth at the Vuelta in 20. He got third in 2022 as a teenager, which is nuts, and then fourth.
Pretty good.
Well, yeah, but then we've seen him go straight up against these guys, and he's not physically. He's there, but mentally, I just have concerns about his ability right now to get through 3 weeks without. He's chasing shadows all the time. He's like a dog that's like thinks a shadow is a rabbit, and he's like running after everything. I was like, I don't think he could roll up to the Tour this year and win.
I think that's what you think. I mean, listen to the Palmares you just described for someone who is a kid. He's 22 years old. He's already stood. I'm fact checking here. Okay, so fourth at the Vuelta in 2023.
He got smoked by Sepp Kuss. I mean, I'm not saying like the guy sucks, but there's room to improve.
Oh my God. Wow. Third in the Vuelta in 2022. Yeah, I think this guy's a potential Tour winner.
Well, okay, yeah, potential Tour winner. But you think he's going to win the... Do you think they would pull... Here's the big question. If Pogacar got hurt this weekend, would they pull him out of the Giro d'Italia? I don't think they would. I think he's on the Giro train this year, and I think he's going to win the Giro this year.
Okay.
But I just think he's on... You can't... He's so locked in on the Giro. Everything's for the Giro. I think he's going to race it, and then I don't think they would say, hey, Juan, you want to do the Tour 3 weeks later? That I don't think UAE would do that.
This is part of being a super predictor. You're seeing around corners. You're seeing things in the shadows that others don't see. You already know the end of that M. Night Shyamalan movie. You know that the kid's been a ghost the whole time, right?
So that's people in the theater like, he's a ghost. He's not real. Wait, the kid's not the ghost.
What is it?
I don't want to spoil the movie.
I think it's safe. It's been like 25 years.
Yeah, Bruce Willis is the ghost.
Bruce Willis is the ghost. Yeah.
Kind of a disturbing movie, actually.
Okay, so it's perhaps a bit more plausible that Matteo could win the Tour. I mean,
we're also debating, like, we're just assuming Pogacar is hurt and he can't race the Tour, which is very unlikely to happen.
Yeah, he takes risks, though. What's really blowing my mind is looking back at Matteo's results. Only 25 years old. His pro cycling stats results go back to 2016. So goodness gracious. And in just looking at how he came up, if you're somebody out there right now, you're on the bus stop ride, maybe you're doing the See-Me ride down in SoCal, Swami's down in San Diego, you're thinking, could I actually make it? I mean, Matteo came up the old-fashioned way. 3 years on hot tubes, a year at Jelly Belly, and then over to Europe. And then, man, this guy has been grinding a long time to get to the top. 4 tours of duty on Movistar, and then made it to Visma, where he is not just hitting ground balls. He's hitting some line drives and occasionally putting it over the monster.
It is crazy.
I don't know anything about baseball, so I hope that was good.
No, I think that's perfect. Yeah. I don't know if a line drive could get over the green monster, but
No, I'm saying a line drive and occasionally hitting them over the
Okay.
monster there
Okay.
at Fenway. Yeah.
He's just he's hitting line drives straight to the left fielder. But it is
Yeah.
nuts.
Straight through your face.
Like Colorado Classic 2018, I remember being at this race. He's 20th overall, 8th in the youth classification. You'd think that's pretty good, right? Like Danny Martinez wins the youth classification. You know who's second? Jack Burke on this podcast.
Oh my God.
Matteo finishes 8th. You'd be like, well, there's nothing. And as Jack said himself, I think this is a little bit of an overstatement that Matteo was like not that talented. So you'd think, well, how could someone that's not that talented just grind? And the guy's been grinding for years, now be a double Paris-Nice winner. Clearly, I think if he has a talent, it's an ability to put in an amazing amount of training and absorb the training. I mean, Andrew, you know this as a monster trainer yourself. It's not about can you do the training, it's can your body absorb the training. So if you can pile on those miles and you get better and better and better, you're going to be pretty good because you can just get better. I mean, someone like me, I've noticed just when if I go riding for a week with like a Tour de France winner, I get worse and they get better just because of their genetic ability to absorb the work. And then I don't have that same genetic ability. But I might not win the Tour in my lifetime. I'm coming to terms with that. But also another thing about Matteo, you look at like 2016, the guy's doing stage races. How old would he have been? He would have been
right,
like 17 years old doing stage races in Europe.
Wild.
So like the ability to get to Europe. I mean, I knew he grew up partially in Madrid while his parents were working abroad. Like having the transatlantic connection is a big help. And that's something Jack Burke talked about where like, he's on the phone speaking in French to small French teams when Jelly Belly's going under. So he can make that jump to the AG2R development team. I feel like we could do a week concentration just on Matteo. It's quite an interesting career now that I'm looking at it. But a couple things about Matteo. He's on AG2R in 2019 on their development team. And they say, we want you to go to our U23 team for 2020. He says, no, I don't want to do that. I want to go to the World Tour team. So he leaves and goes to Movistar because they're willing to put him on the World Tour team. He's on Movistar for 4 years and is good, like showing promise. But he, as you said, he's doing everything himself, like driving to his own altitude camps, soup to nuts. It's all Matteo cooked up, training plans, whatever, food, diet. Goes to Visma because he trusts the system. I heard he got paid less, by the way, to go to Visma. Took a pay cut. And then I talked to someone about this week, and it's the big difference since he made the move is now he just trusts them completely. He doesn't worry about anything other than riding his bike. So it's like Visma's nuts. They have their own software. So you weigh your food, you take a picture of your food, you upload it to their software, and then it like tells you what to eat for every meal. So
it's like it's like the Nexium of food.
Yeah. And there's also like a Seagram's Air, human trafficking somehow associated with it. And we don't fully understand what's going on there. But so you don't have to think about anything. Like he said, they went to an altitude camp in the Canary Islands. No, maybe this was in Sierra Nevada. And they wouldn't let them bring their chef into the hotel. So they built like a lean-to in the parking garage where the chef was like making food out there for them. So it's full service, and that's clearly served him well. Is he going to win the Tour this year? Probably not. But here's another question for you. When's the last rider you remember winning Paris-Nice and then being like, all right, shift's over. Now I got to go lead the team at the classics? Like that's like Sean Kelly stuff too. Like I don't know the last time I remember that happening.
Yeah, I certainly don't remember it happening. I'm trying to think. What's wild to me as I think about this is, and we'll get into this when we talk about Sanremo. I just spent a lot of time thinking about Wout van Aert's trajectory, and I love Wout, and I want to think that there are much bigger things ahead for Wout. And I also, when I'm on the trainer, I spend a lot of time looking out the window out at the forest behind my home, thinking about like, how did this go wrong? What happened? Like, look at Matteo's trajectory. And I just think about, do you remember when Wout would just ride off the front on like a flat stage when the Peloton was going all out at the Tour, and he'd just be like, oh, I'm going to win by 15 minutes. And he'd just ride off. Where is that guy? Where have all the cowboys gone?
I feel like he was like winning Tour de France stages by accident.
he just would like ride off, just like whatever. Oh, you have 5 guys on the front that just put everybody in the gutter and the crosswinds in an echelon. I think I'm going to just ride off the front.
Andy, I mean, this is potentially very hot.
Mod Von 2? Sure. I'm just going to go win
double
that
Von
stage.
2 day.
Double Von 2, no problem. Oh, it's a sprint. I haven't, had these horrific injuries yet, and I don't have kids. I'm just going to go ahead and win the sprint against the world's best sprinters. Totally. I mean, I could just like keep going. I've also, man,
won the Champs-Élysées day almost as like a joke. Try to win this. Oh, I won. Wow.
Yeah.
That was pretty easy.
Yeah. The things come and go quickly in the world of pro cycling as the world turns, the sand in the hourglass, everything from every soap opera. Like, remember when all we could talk about when it came to sprinting was Fabio Jakobsen and Dylan Groenewegen?
Yeah, that is crazy. That is,
yeah.
Well, it's weird about
Sam
Dylan.
Bennett.
You're like, Dylan Groenewegen, when's the last time he won a big race? He won a stage at the Tour last year. And then what's he, like a cicada? He's in hibernation, waiting. Yeah. Where is he? The guy won a Tour.
He's waiting for tornado season in the Midwest. Yeah.
Why are they everywhere? Here's another crazy thing about Matteo. So this is the second year in a row this has happened. At Paris-Nice, no team support, by the way. Like, what is going on with that? And then up against a stacked UAE team who appears to have the strongest ride in the race in Joao Almeida. And are they magicians? Like, where did they go for the second half of that race? It's just like, I am going to dominate this summit finish on stage 4, and then I will disappear. Like, that team is, when they have Pogacar, they are the best team in the world. When he's gone, they are just twisting in the wind. Like, I don't know what it is. I guess, I talked to a team director about this, and they're like, yeah, like the best doping in the sport is having the yellow jersey in your team, because it like whips everybody else into shape. And it's never been more on display than with UAE right now. When they don't have Pogacar, they just are a disappearing act.
Yeah, technical subplot as well. They clearly have the most advanced high performance methodologies, and this is not a euphemism. I just think they have the money to buy the R&D to be at the very cutting edge of physiology, things with heat training, altitude, whatever the case may be. It seems like Visma is incrementally behind UAE in that regard, is the feeling that I have. And yet, Spencer, I don't understand what's going on with this new Colnago bike and why no one is riding it ever.
I got in trouble for this, by the way. Colnago reached out because I was a little harsh on the bike.
Maybe they should send us some bikes to check out, Well,
I did say that. I was like, I wouldn't feel comfortable endorsing this without having one.
Did they provide any information about why they're not riding the bikes?
They offered to like have us do a 30-minute informational call with them. Maybe I shouldn't be saying this. Maybe I'm violating some sort of confidentiality. But, that's all you need to know, right? That's your answer right there. Like, if they liked it, they'd be racing it.
Yeah. I don't understand what's going on there. I also, again, because I've been so deep in the Sanremo archives, it's really interesting to watch the sport go from, it's kind of reminds me of watching, things have come full circle in skateboarding. When I was peak skateboarding, people were wearing pants that could fit like 2 or 3 people in them, just like gigantic pants and, triple XL t-shirts. I guess that's kind of come back into style after 35 years. You look at footage of Sanremo or any bike race from more than 6 years ago, and it looks like you're watching, like people with head sweats with like the tails, 46 centimeter bars, like the old Le Mans style bike positioning where you're like way back. I don't know if that's
Superman. Just in your drop. Yeah, just in your drops, you're like fully spread out.
Yeah, you're like 10 centimeters behind the bottom bracket. Your saddle's as far back on the rails as you can go. Your frame's probably 2 centimeters too big. That's just like what you've got a baggy jersey on, just like whatever. I'm going to wear a Pearl Izumi high vis wind vest.
Well, not to mention the tires are like 19 millimeters wide, pumped up. They're rock hard. And then drives me nuts at the Tour last year. Everyone's losing their minds because these guys are breaking climbing records. It's like, do you know how bad the equipment was even 10 years ago?
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And I, of course, in some ways, I still really love that era. But yeah, it's like watching something completely different. It's like a spaceship landed with advanced technology, and now that's what we see in bike races. It's quite different.
Well, also on WoW, I was just thinking, like, is Matteo the strongest? He might be their strongest classics rider right now because he was definitely better than Wout at opening weekend. I don't know what Wout's been doing since then, probably some altitude camps, but Matteo Jorgenson might be their best stage racer and classics rider at the moment, which
Right.
is nuts, absolutely nuts. But then on the bikes, like, so Colinago, that's an aero bike, very aero bike. Can you tell me the name of Specialized's current aero bike model?
It's the tarmac.
Doesn't exist. They don't have. It's just Tarmac is like
Well, the tarmac is the everything bike.
it's the everything bike. So it's like that's
Yeah.
what Colinago, the team ride, UAE rides like this everything frame from Colinago. It's fine. It looks fine. Like it's probably not the fastest bike, but they ride deep dish wheels. Have you noticed that they ride deep dish wheels for every race? Always the
have.
same wheels.
Yeah.
It's probably like pretty aero with that setup, and I don't think you need an aero bike. I don't know. Maybe I'm not supposed to say that, but if
Oh.
Specialized doesn't make one, remember they had the Venge and they discontinued it.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw the Venge when I watched Sagan lose that sprint at Sanremo, which was wild. He was on the Venge that year, the year that he lost the sprint. Okay, my train of thought is in Wichita with the Koch brothers. It's come back. The thing I was going to say about equipment is something that did strike me is that it seems to be a fast bike. They all seem to be pretty fast bikes. Visma has been on the same aero bike for a long time in aero
Like
bike
5 years or something.
Yeah, that's like 10,000 years in human years when you're on an aero bike on the same design for more than 4 years. So they've been on that thing for a while. I mean, I guess it's a very fast bike, and at the same time, I am wondering, is it on par with, like the Ridleys we see Uno X on that have that gigantic fairing on the front of the head tube. But we'll leave that conversation perhaps to Nero or Nero Cycling. They can talk about that. We can talk about Milan-Sanremo. So
wait, anything but on Tirreno before we move on. You think I think Juanes is going to win the Giro. You think he's going to win the Tour. So we both think he's pretty good. One question for you. We'll talk about Ghana with Sanremo, so we're going to skip over Ghana.
Yeah.
Pidcock, second on that summit finish. Pretty good, you'd say. 6th overall. Do you remember this interview that said, I'm going to focus on GC? And he's getting 6th? Like, what happened? Is that good? I don't think that's a very good result, right? Got beat by Felipe Ghana in a stage race.
A joke that I often make with my friends who race bikes is we all know that rider who's either ramping up or they're coming back from an injury. Like, if you talk to them, those are the two states they're in. It's either like, well, I'm just starting to ramp up. I'm putting in some big weeks. I just got a 6th, in the GC, or they're coming back from an injury, but they're never like, yeah, this is it. I'm here. I'm fully focused and I'm ready to win. I feel like that's kind of what we get with Pidcock. That's the vibe I pick up from him.
Well, then he did the classic, I could have stayed with them after the race. I actually could have stayed with them, but I let the wheel go. Which, by the way, you never see Matteo Jorgenson saying. Just observation I've noticed where he's never at the finish line saying, I could have beat Ayuso, but oops, let the wheel go. That was very group ride.
Yeah.
I think I've heard that on the group ride before. But yeah, something to point out with Pidcock. Pretty good summit finish, but then you're like, not a great GC result there. And I think he did call his GC shot earlier. But Ghana gets second. Unbelievable, right? That was pretty impressive. Heaviest rider ever on the podium at that race, by the way, 86 kilos at the start of Tirreno Adriatico. Why is he so good? Because he wants to win Milano-Sanremo, longest race of the year. It's on Saturday. It's an Italian race. It's on Saturday because Sunday is for Mass, apparently. From Milan, not really Milan anymore. They kicked them out. I think it's like an outskirt of Milan now, to Sanremo, the seaside town on the Mediterranean. I'm going to list the last few winners just so people know what this is about. Jasper Philipsen, sprinter, won last year. Van der Poel the year before, solo. Matej Mohoric, solo the year before that. Jasper Stuyven, solo the year before that. Wout van Aert, little sprint year before that. Julian Alaphilippe, little sprint, I believe, year before that. Vincenzo Nibali, solo the year before that. Kwiatkowski in 2017. This is my favorite edition. three-way sprint, three-way bike throw with Sagan and Alaphilippe.
Oh, so good.
Used to be known as the Sprinters Classic. As I say that, you'll notice that's a lot of solo wins from a lot of non-sprinters. So not really a Sprinters Classic, I guess. There's a bunch of climbs. There's a mountain range or a mountain pass in the middle that's not really raced at full speed, but then there's these little climbs along the coast. They're not big. Like the Poggio, the last one's 4K at like 3.7%. So they do it at like 24 miles an hour. So not a huge climb. Someone could get over it like Philipsen did last year. I know how Pogačar can win this race. I've been going through the last few years. Andrew, you've been watching a lot of it too.
Yeah.
You've got thoughts. Why don't you go? And then I'll tell you how he's going to win this.
Yeah. If you haven't gone back in the archives to watch past editions of this race, you got to go do it. I think that this might be the best 20 minutes of bike racing
It is, yeah.
of the entire year. Like, it's because you get everyone. This is like if every Mortal Kombat character were on the screen at one time and they were fighting, and you would find out who truly is the best. This is like the mixed martial arts of professional cycling. Everybody from whether you're a sprinter, I was pulling footage. I sent you a screenshot last night. I'm trying to remember what year it was from, but Caleb Ewan, second wheel going over the Poggio.
That crazy?
Yeah. So it's like everybody's training because it's the Poggio is a 4% grade and drafting plays a huge role. Before that, we have the Cipressa, and then there's some flat in between. But whether you're a classics rider, a sprinter, a climber, a GC rider, you have a puncher's chance of winning this race. And it really often boils down to the prisoner's dilemma, where someone makes some move coming off the Poggio at the right moment, and that causes the favorites to just look at each other and do the like, well, I'm not going to close the gap because then I'm not going to be able to win the sprint. Like, this is the one match I have to burn. And then once someone gets a gap, in my analysis, if you have more than 6 seconds coming off the Poggio, you're winning the race. And like, there's still a few kilometers left to go, but somehow that seems to be the margin that you need. Like, there's enough, you have a high enough speed that for someone to close a 6-second gap, it would take probably a 30-second full gas effort. And if you put that 30-second full gas effort out, we're talking like high VO2 effort, I would say, then you're probably going to lose when you get jumped in the sprint or whatever unfolds.
I would say the only wrinkle to that
Yeah.
is if you have a teammate, if you're a sprinter with a teammate to do that effort. And last
That's
year,
true. Right.
I forgot this. Mahoric should have won the race last year.
Right.
He just did exactly what you described.
Yeah.
Like Stuyven did in 2021. And Vanderpool reels him in because he's like, hey, you know what? I'm going to pull out and pull this guy back because I want my teammate to win. I didn't like that. On rewatch, it bothered me even more.
Yeah, that's Stuyven victory, by the way. For me, I've watched all of these races live. I've watched them multiple times. Maybe it's like Men in Black where my brain's erased every 24 hours.
Yeah, it is kind of like that with
my wife might say that about me. However, it's just thrilling to watch these races and to look at the chess that's unfolding. So Spencer, I'm going to share a couple of observations that I have, and then I'd love to hear how you're thinking about what it takes to win this race. So this is what I've observed from going deep on the tape. As I told you privately, I'm like a JFK conspiracy theorist who's been in the Zapruder film. I've read all 3 million pages of the archives, and I think I'm starting to see some patterns. I've got all the note cards are like pinned to it's this board just off camera, and I've got like pieces of string going between them showing what's happening. So what we typically see happening is some team sets the pace once they hit the Cipressa, or there are a handful of teams that start riding at the front. Then the Peloton gets strung out going down the Cipressa, which is like a pretty technical, very high-speed descent. It's almost impossible to pass.
Yeah.
So teams tend to want to be in front, I think, going into the Cipressa so that they can keep their rider, and ideally the top 10 once they go down the Cipresa. Also, I think this is even more significant than positioning, is that that's going to protect you ideally from a crash, right? Because like you're more likely to crash the farther back you are in the line of riders, I think, because there are just more people who potentially could crash in front of you. Then we get into that flat section between the Cipresa and the entrance to the Poggio. At the entrance to the Poggio, it's like, the last 10K of a sprint stage in the Tour. It's all block. They're probably going 35 miles an hour, like by the time they turn to go onto the Poggio. In between, what happens is pretty interesting. There's one specific traffic island where I noticed there have been a number of wrecks, and you can either go left or right. Going to the left is the side you want to be on. Just people's, there's only so much space on the road. People stuck on the right, there tends to be a crash, or you can lose a lot of wheels, and then you're going to have to do way more work right before going into the Poggio, which you don't want to do. What I've also noticed on that flat between the Cipresa and the Poggio is, if you ride on Zwift, you know what the blob is. There's always the blob. So it almost seems like you're wasting a ton of energy putting any effort into being at the front or having riders keeping the pace high up the Cipresa, because once you get through that technical descent, if you don't crash, it's just going to blob up again. And if
it's quite slow. I was surprised by that.
Yeah.
I mean, Pidcock at one point last year takes his dick out and just starts peeing. Did you see that?
Yeah.
On the front. So it's like, it can't be that hard, right? If you're doing that.
Yeah. So they blob up, and then people move around again. Then we get to the Poggio, and it's impossible to drop anyone on the Poggio. And like what we've seen the past couple of years with Pog is he's had his team on the front over the Cipresa. They're typically losing a rider because they have someone riding so hard, just like, on a mountain stage. It's like, okay, one guy down. So by the time they get to the Poggio, where they're again pacing the entire peloton, setting up the winner of the race, they're burning all of their matches. Whereas with Mathieu van der Poel and Jasper Philipsen, they tend to just kind of be floating back there, letting everyone else do all of the work, and then waiting for that big attack to go. And then typically there's a big attack on the Poggio that attacks that have succeeded and have failed. They tend to come within probably the last 40 seconds of the climb. And what people are trying to do is create separation over the top, bearing in mind that coming off the descent, as I noted, if you have a 6-second gap and somebody doesn't have a teammate behind you to help them relay up to you, you're probably winning the race. Okay. And so
that's how not Mohoric. That's how Van der Poel won in 2023. He attacks at the very last second.
Yeah.
It's a small gap at the top. My son kept saying, they're right there. They're going to catch him. Like, they're not going to catch him.
Right.
You can't. It's impossible.
Right. So anyway, that's just kind of like a general overview, which you may have picked up if you've watched it as closely as I have. Spencer, I know you have thoughts. I wanted to share something I observed about Mathieu van der Poel that I thought was really interesting watching this over and over. I think that he does a lot of things that are tactically genius. One of the things that he does that I think is really, really interesting, if you watch him descending, like if you watch, I'm going to forget what year it was, but there's a year that Pidcock closed the gap to Pog, and then Pidcock is on, he is as close as you possibly could be to another rider going down a descent. If you watch Van der Poel when he descends, he's always leaving probably 3 bike lengths between himself and the rider in front of him. I think there are a couple of reasons he's doing this. I think he's slightly heavier typically than the people who are in front of him. So it's easy for him to increase his relative velocity just by getting a bit more aero. It's almost like he could close that gap at any moment, but he's not. The reason I think he's doing that is in the event anyone wrecks in front of him, number one, he's going to avoid the wreck. He's not right on their wheel. The second thing I think he's doing is I think that it's, whether he's doing this intentionally or not, we've all had the experience of predator or prey drive when you're out in a race. And if someone is on you and they're sitting on your wheel, you can typically, even on a downhill, you can kind of hear how they're breathing. You can hear they're shifting. you can think through, and I think have a pretty good understanding of how is this rider feeling and what's their next move going to be. When somebody's 3 bike lengths back, you kind of constantly have this fear of, are they about to overtake me? And I think that results, if you're the rider in front, I think you push yourself harder and harder because you're like, okay, maybe I'm about to open a gap. Maybe this person's about to close the gap. So I think what Van der Poel is doing from behind is he's pushing the people in front of him to take more risks and ride harder, and he's just saving energy. And he's also still getting a great draft 3 wheels back. The other area where I think he has a real edge in this race is I think that he is the absolute best rider in the sport at reaccelerating out of corners. Like, I think he's better than anyone. And I mean, if you look at his cyclocross racing, that's where that skill comes from. But he can reaccelerate out of these downhill corners on the Poggio better than anyone in the history of the entire race. So I think those are some of the areas where he has an edge. I have a lot of other thoughts, but those are just a few things I noticed watching this race over and over. What have you got?
So you're describing the best rider. Everything about him is perfect for this race, and he's won this race one time. That's how hard it is to win.
Yeah, that's how hard it is.
So
that's
hard.
why this is so good to watch.
And so the Poggio, we probably should have. Yeah, why this is so good to watch is because these climbs are not hard enough for Pogacar to ride away. Like the rest of the sport apparently is now too hard because he can just ride away. Do you know who has the KOM on the Poggio? Which rider on Strava?
Ghana?
No wrong answers.
Is it Ghana?
Yeah, it's Ghana. Filippo Ganna, 86 kilos. So he's going 24.3 miles an hour up this thing. 86 freaking kilos. I'm trying to figure out, right as you're saying that, I'm doing some calculations trying to figure out how much power. I think that's around like 700 watts average for 5.5 minutes. So
what a monster.
Yeah, absolute monster. Absolute monster. So here's the problem. This is a math problem for Pogacar. Everything you said is correct, by the way. I think Van der Poel, Pogacar cannot leave this to the Poggio because you cannot drop people. Van der Poel did one time. My son said, well, why doesn't Pogacar the next year just do what Van der Poel did? And he kind of tried. So then we watched 2024. Pogacar attacks at the end, but he's already attacked a bunch. He's got no teammates. It's just like he can't get the separation, partly because he's not heavy enough, because he can't put out the raw. If Ghana's putting out 700 watts, Pogacar can't do that same amount of raw power because he's just a lot smaller, which helps him most of the time. But I've been shocked at the inflation on the times on the Poggio. So the record is 5:31. That's Ghana. Strava says that Pogacar's time is also 5:31, but he went over in front of Ghana last year. So it must be how they entered the climb. But ostensibly, Pogacar climbed it faster last year. So let's just call that 5:25. That's a lot of power. That's a little under 600 watts for Pogacar. Can he go faster than that? I don't think so. Like, here's Valverde. So let's say 5:31 is the record. Valverde in 2019 did it in 5:41. And you remember, you said no one can drop anyone on the Poggio. Remember Nibali rode away in 2018?
Yeah.
And then solo to the win. He did that in like 6 minutes about. So like half a minute slower, he rode away from the group than Pogacar went over with the group last year. So you would say it just might not be possible with these modern times. I think if you want to win, if Pogacar wants to win, either you do nothing like Van der Poel and attack at the very end, or you just go to a sprint, or you attack off the bottom of the descent like Stuyven, or you got to go on the Cipressa because it's hard. It's 10 minutes. It's twice as long as the Poggio. It is like 6K at around 4.5%. So it's a little bit harder. But if you go there, and Johnny Bunyo did this in 1990 and soloed to the finish line for the win. So we know it's possible, but it's that way you talked about, this blob and the slowing. If Pogacar is off the front and his UAE team is not there, and the Cipressa has been so hard that he's been launched off the front, like the team winds it up, he goes, there might not be enough of a chase to pull him back, because if you're isolated from your teammates or you have one teammate, who's going to chase him down? Because it's like, well, I'm not going to chase him down because then you're going to win. And then you get some sort of stalemate. I think he's got to go on the Cipressa. It's not a great option, but it might be his only option, because even if, let's say Van der Poel doesn't win, it's like, well, what about Ghana? What if Milan's there? What if Philipsen is there? You're not going to beat those guys in a sprint. You might not even beat Michael Matthews in a sprint, who beat him here last year. So I think he's got to go long, unfortunately. Fortunately for us, unfortunately for him, I did hear that this is from Pro Rider. UAE might be thinking about pacing the Ticino pass. I think it's like the pass from Milan that takes you to the coast. It's rarely been done, but they might be thinking about pacing that hard to get some fatigue in the legs, which would totally change the race, which is not what we've seen in years past.
Okay. That'd be surprising. So that's a disruptive strategy that potentially works. If we're in a scenario where it kind of plays out as it has in years past, Pog attacks over the Cipressa and creates separation, it's just really hard for me to imagine him not getting caught in the flat between the Cipressa and the Poggio. I don't know how an individual stays away from a group there.
Well, the group, I think, would implode because you see this over and over and over again. It's just like, well, Vanderpool, you chase. No, well, Pidcock, you chase. Well, I mean, that would be the only way it works if they don't want to chase you and you've made the climb so hard that also it's been done before. So I guess we know it's possible. If Bunyo could do it, Pogacar can do it.
Okay, so here's a wrinkle that I think we might see if let's say Pog does create separation. I don't understand why this is the case. Maybe you can enlighten me, Spencer. There's always a French, well, maybe it's because Arnaud Démare has won in the past, but there are French teams at the front prior to the Cipressa through the Poggio doing a disproportionate amount of work.
I looked this up. I noticed
as I watched it, I was like, what are these teams doing? They're not going to win. But I mean, I guess, of course, they think they have a chance of winning, which is why they're doing it. However, just watching it on the face of it, I'm like, this is like, what are you doing? This is bizarre.
I started to lose my mind because I'm like, what year is this? Is this the Démare year? But Lawrence Pithy was on Groupama last year, and that's who they were working for.
Okay.
Also, here's just a few info dumps. So my calculations are in. So Ghana, if he had no drafting, he would have had to do 758 watts for 5.5 minutes.
Oh my God.
Of course, though, he was in the wheels for a lot of that. So it's probably lower, but what are we saying? 650 to 700 probably is what he had to do to stay up there. Also, Pogacar attacking on the Cipressa, one thing, he doesn't have to be solo. What if he gets clear with 5 riders? Those guys can definitely stay away and there would be chaos behind. And if those riders are slower than him or it's hard enough on the Cipressa, let's say Vanderpool gets clear with them, maybe he then could drop Vanderpool on the Poggio. Like at least he has a chance because it's not, when it's lined out like a sprint finish, that's so much easier for Vanderpool because he can just sit in the wheels and hide and it's going to be hard to drop him versus more of a man-on-man fight. Just a beautiful battle, one-on-one battle with him on the Poggio, then maybe he would have a better chance of dropping him. But I think if he sits and waits, I think we've seen that played out. And I think we maybe have hit peak speed on the Poggio. I don't know how much faster these guys can go. Like in the peak of the doping era, Fondriest and Laurent Jalabert, they're doing it at about the same speed. So like 24 miles an hour, 38K an hour. I just don't know if he can go faster than that.
Yeah. This Ghana phenomenon we do think of as being new, and certainly him riding at 750 watts or whatever you calculated for 5 minutes is it's as mind-blowing as a Katusha rocket.
Actually, well, what do you think he did at Tirreno? He finished like 50 seconds behind Ayuso on a hard, like 8K at 8% summit finish.
Right.
So like, what did he put out for that thing?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Ghana's been doing this, though, since at least 2017. So if you go back to the 2017 race, what do you see on the Poggio? You see Ghana at the front pacing the entire peloton to the top of the climb. This is the year Kwiatkowski won. And it's a bigger Ghana, but this has been this steady progression. And again, going back to Matteo, like, what do these guys do? Like, they pick up the hammer and they swing it. Like, this is not magic. If you turn on the TV and think that Ghana just showed up one day riding at this superhuman wattage for 5 minutes, this guy's been just like chipping away at this project for years.
So I added you can add like a drafting element to the calculation, 630 watts for 5.5 minutes. So
all right, that's still
easy. It is shocking when you do these calculations how few how much less watts per kilo Ghana can do than Pogacar. I think people think watts per kilo are like you do more watts per kilo and you go faster, but you're not racing up a 90% grade.
Right.
Like Ghana can do like a watt per kilo less and be going the same speed
Wow.
because his raw watts are so much higher
Yeah.
that he doesn't need to do like 9 watts per kilo. He can do an 8 watts per kilo effort and stay with Pogacar. But to put a bow on this, who's going to win this thing, Andrew?
You know, I read yesterday that Biniam Girmay is back for Sanremo, and this is certainly a wild card choice, but that's what I'm going to go with.
Biniam Girmay? What the holy smokes? Yeah, I mean, this is the craziest of the monuments. I think it's Matthew van der Poel. I think I want to say Milan, I want to say Ghana for sentimentality, but I think Van der Poel wins this. He looked dangerous all week at Tirreno. He's like a shark circling his prey. But on the Biniam thing, this would be the monument he wins because Philipsen, obviously, like if Philipsen can win it, Biniam can win it for sure. But the thing is about monuments and Olympics and World Championships, the same 3 riders win every race.
Yeah.
It's Matthew van der Poel, Remco Evenepoel, or Tadej Pogacar. Sanremo's kind of the exception. So yeah, Biniam would be shy. See, what has he even raced recently? Hold on.
I don't know. I don't know if he has. I mean, this is not a super intelligent pick for me because he doesn't have the race days in his legs equally. You know, I'm a Biniam Girmay fan, and I feel he has this victory in him.
Well, so he did race a little bit in Mallorca, and then he got second at an Algarve stage, which is not terrible, to Jordi Meus. This is like, it used to happen like this a little bit more, where you would get good rider. I mean, even remember like Jared Chalik won, and what was that, 2013? You're like, where the heck did that come from?
Yeah.
Like even Christoph in 2014, Degenkolb, Damar.
Matty Goss, 2011.
Matty Goss, yeah. That mean those guys, they're probably not even on par with what I don't believe any of them ever won a green jersey at the Tour de France, unless I'm missing something. So Biniam would actually be probably a higher quality pick. So if the race returned to its original form, yeah, Biniam definitely has a chance. And yeah, as you said, it's like, I don't know, Philipsen. Who would have thought he won last year? He was sitting in the back of that group, not in the wind at all. Maybe Biniam does have a chance, but I don't know. Your Van der Poel case kind of convinced me that he's the perfect rider for this.
He's the perfect rider. I mean, if you haven't, go back, watch every edition of this race that you can with Matthew van der Poel in it, and just watch how this guy rides.
And he doesn't seem, Pogacar, I guess, doesn't seem that stressed ever, but if you watch him versus Pogacar in this specific race, Pogacar looks like he's laboring. He's just like, I got to drop these guys. I got to drop these guys. And Van der Poel's just like easy peasy in the wheels, just like I'm moving up when I need to move up. I'll attack when I need to attack. And like, obviously he's not an automatic win because he doesn't win that often here, but no one wins that often unless you're Eric Zabel, I guess. And you can just win 5 of them or 4 of them, whatever he wants.
Yeah.
Van der Poel's as close to perfect as you can get.
Yeah. It's style-wise. Style-wise, if you look at that Mohoric win in 2022, where you had the dropper post, if you don't remember that descent, there was the dropper post, then there also was Mohoric going off the road and almost wrecking twice. He was just like reckless, out of control. And I'm thinking about the year that Van der Poel beat Wout, dropped Wout and won Paris-Roubaix. And then when Van der Poel was off the front, similar to Mohoric, Van der Poel was riding at like the absolute edge of his ability to control the bike and was all over the place, but it was beautiful and it was smooth. So even as you were like, you just felt like he could wreck at any moment, the way he was taking corners and weaving in and out of some of the traffic furniture and where they had barriers in strange places, but he always pulls it off, and it's always with panache. And when you watch him descend, again, we talked about this last week where Pidcock's out there making the Safa Brian videos. He had the dramatic Alpe d'Huez victory and in that descent that we'll never forget. like nobody can touch Van der Poel, in my opinion, when it comes to handling a bike. And when you watch that guy go out of a corner, it's inhuman. No one does it like him.
Pidcock did effortlessly bridge up to him and Van der Poel and Pogacar on that descent last year. As you say that reminds me. But Andrew, I've got to pack the kids up, take them down to downtown Denver for some March.
Is that a euphemism, Spencer?
What could go wrong?
Yeah.
But perfect activity for a Thursday. But we will see. We'll see who wins, and we'll be back to talk about it next week. Thank you so much, and we will speak soon.